Hi, welcome to CFB Analyst podcast here. This is Saturday, and it is July the 14th. Welcome in, guys. This is Bashir bringing you this presentation of the podcast on my channel. So let's get started right off the bat, looking at Bleacher Report, top headlines today. The top wide receiver transfer picks Georgia. So Georgia's got another receiver to add on to the list for next year, I believe. Bielema says he's done with all of college football, so we will not see Brett Bielema. If we can take his word for it, we will not see Brett Bielema for the rest of history in college football. UL, which I'm pretty positive that's Louisville, might rename their stadium. Kind of a, under a little bit of out of today's top 5 headlines, or the top headlines is less important. One of the bigger stories of the day, if not the biggest, Rutgers players investigated for fraud, which is interesting considering Rutgers isn't really even good at football. Yeah, I said it. So I don't know how they got caught fraud. Whatever, it beats me. So it'll be interesting. Of course, I'll be looking at the live chat throughout the stream and the podcast, as well as if you would listen to it afterwards and you are not in the live stream, you will hear the questions from people. Irish pool offer for 4-star wide receivers. So he's going to be the 4-star wide receiver that committed is gone. Some other things going on is the Troy head coach sends ring to parents of late player. Hold up, I can't read. And very interesting day so far. But the big story, I think, for today is Bielema. He says he's loving the NFL life. He says he does not want to go back to the college ranks. And I'm just thinking, how long have you been in the NFL? I mean, Bielema, think logically here. And Bielema really has had a lot of negative controversy and a bunch of negative connotation behind him. He had success at Wisconsin and left that for Arkansas. Got Arkansas up a bit, but really they didn't fight hard enough to get all the way back out of that 2007 team, or the 2011 Sugar Bowl appearing team, stuff like that with Brian Mallett and that year. So we'll see what Chad Morris can do at Arkansas, but Bielema is definitely going through a rough time right now. And I would not trust anything that Bielema is saying right now, because Bielema has said things like this in the past and did not mean anything. Got to watch out for, according to PFF College, stingy coverage, the 32.4% catch rate in the secondary. Sean Harper Jr. at second in the FBS last year. Or second in the FBS, I think, maybe turning out. No. Point is, he's a guy to kind of watch out for, Sean Harper Jr. in that secondary for Washington State, and I think that team can struggle quite a bit unless they, completely surprise me. So, and some more big news today. KJ Gray and Brendan DeVera have the Rutgers football team for fraud. KJ Gray is safety, and linebacker Brendan DeVera has been both dismissed for violating team rules, and we will not see them come fall. Last season, Gray led Rutgers, so the leading tackler from a year ago in the secondary, with 58 tackles in 10 games. He also started 4 games. He's probably going to end up starting, and he's not going to able to. So, yeah, that's basically the news so far. So, hot take of the day for me is going to end up being Alabama. Now, Alabama, and by the way, comment if you have anything to say about this. Alabama, of course, earlier this week lost Terrell Lewis. The reason why it's concerning is because Terrell Lewis was supposed to be that guy to fill the hole of Rashaan Evans and Sean Dion Hamilton, who left for the NFL draft or graduated. If you take a look at Alabama's linebacking core, Christian Miller's the next guy up. He's a senior. Doesn't project to play too much. Jamie, he's not. Linebackers has been Mack Wilson, Dylan Moses. They're monsters. But I'm not buying Jamie Mosley. I'm not really too heavy on Christian Miller. Not a whole lot of depth, and that's the thing that's concerning to me. That's the thing that was concerning as well to Greg McElroy from ESPN, saying that the depth on this defense, this is a different Alabama defense, and it shouldn't jump too high on this Alabama bandwagon. We still don't know who their quarterback is. They don't have a receiver who has had 15 or more receptions. They got Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Devontae Smith, all solid players. Xavier Marsh was a pretty solid player. I just don't know exactly how good these guys can be if they can have a Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper type receiver. We don't know that. If I ask someone, if I polled 10 Alabama fans, it would be pretty balanced between who's going to be the next Amari Cooper or Calvin Ridley, Jeudy, Ruggs, or Smith. There's no one that stands out from the crowd for Alabama. Alabama fans will say something different, and that's the problem I see there. They got a good offensive line. Ross Pierce-Becker is probably one of the better offensive linemen. Lester Cotton's one of the better offensive linemen, and Jonah Williams is a great center as well. So they got a good offensive line coming back. The only question is at that left tackle position right now with Alex Leatherwood, but he's a pretty good player as well. Not huge on Hale Hentages, not huge on Irvin Smith Jr., and, with all those issues with Najee Harris in the locker room wanting to transfer, you got Joshua Jacobs, a junior, wanting to step up. I believe he's actually a sophomore, isn't he? Or freshman. I thought he was a freshman. Well, anyway, it's going Joshua Jacobs step up right below Damian Harris. I don't know exactly if Joshua Jacobs is the raw talent that Najee Harris has. I really like Najee last year when he got John and that secondary lost a lot. Trayvon Diggs is really the only guy that they return. Deontay Thompson, okay. Xavier McKinley, haven't seen anything of him. Savion Smith, haven't really seen anything of him as a transfer, though. Alabama is concerning, not to mention their schedule is the SEC is tougher than what we're giving credit for. This might be the toughest year the SEC has had in 5 years. I certainly think it will be, because if we take a look at the last 4 years in the SEC, it's either been top-heavy or Alabama and the rest. It's been Alabama and the rest for 3 years in a row when you had one team beat Alabama for 3 seasons in between 2014 and 2016. And that one team, by the way, was caught for cheating because they had escorts in recruiting to the players. And, that's a huge negative to the part of Alabama and the SEC is because, look, there is a 3-year stretch. Alabama wins one national championship, 2 playoffs, where they essentially got an invite to the playoffs that, deservingly so or not, it's just the conference tremendously weak through that time. To the point where the only team that really even laid a finger on Alabama was cheating during that time. Also, Alabama lost to Texas A&M in a bad year for the SEC. Of course, Alabama lost to Auburn on the kick six. I think that was a bad year for the SEC. And the reason I'm saying this stuff, guys, for the Alabama losing to Texas A&M and the Alabama losing to Auburn, it was a bad year for the SEC, not necessarily because of the quality of the conference, because the quality of the conference was top. I think those were bad years for the SEC because they would crown a champion that had that blemish on the record, and they would either beat each other up or have a tough conference, have an easy conference to go through and not have the resume. And that's a problem with the SEC right now, is you can't quite find that find. Ohio has stretches where they would go undefeated in a Big Ten play, and then Wisconsin goes undefeated in Big Ten play a year ago. And the problem with a couple years ago, and this is why this was a bad year for the Big Ten, even though it was the best football conference. The SEC was the best football conference, but it was bad. The reason it was bad is because you had the controversy of Penn State and Ohio State. There would have been no controversy if Wisconsin gets that 4th down, and let's say they drive down the field and end up winning that game against Penn State. No controversy whatsoever. That 4th and 1, about a half yard away from continuing that game and possibly being able to end the controversy of Ohio State versus Penn State. It didn't happen. And no one ever even talks about that game. Penn State and USC was the game everyone talked about. That was the Rose Bowl game of the 2 hottest teams. But that second hottest team behind USC, Penn State, who everyone was in love with even after the Rose Bowl loss, realized that Wisconsin team that ended up going 12-0 the year before and ended up going 11-3 that season, that Wisconsin team was a half yard away from possibly being able to keep the game going. They had a huge lead in that game. I was at that game. It was a great game. I loved it. But Wisconsin never gets the credit they deserve. And that's the thing that you can kind of go with. The SEC gets over-credited. Yes, I said the SEC gets over-credited. You credit teams for not doing what they need to, essentially, to win the conference. You credit teams like Florida for 2 years in a row in the weakest division in all of Power 5. All right, so up next, I'll continue with Alabama by showing you guys my top 25 going into the postseason. Keep in mind, guys, I will have a revision before week 0, and I will revisit this topic before the week 0 games start, even though the week 0 teams, none of them are in my top 25 to end the season or in the preseason. So here we go. Number 1, I got Auburn. I think Auburn can run through their schedule. Let's go ahead and go, through conference real quick. So credit to my man, Clay Ramsey, if you're listening. Leave a comment. I guess, I don't know. But here's what I got. My predictions have definitely changed. Boston College, I am still high on Boston College. I think they will win 9 games. I'm not high on that stretch of Miami, Virginia Tech, Clemson, and Florida State. The only game I see them getting is Clemson. This is why Boston College is going to lose its luster following the Miami and Virginia Tech game. So they're going to be a team that started out 7-0. I believe 7-0. Yeah, 7-0 going into the Miami game. And then they lose that one. And then they lose to a Virginia Tech team who would already at that point have 2 losses. In this scenario. So then all of a sudden, you are looking at a Boston College team who has fallen in the rankings. They'll probably be a top 10 team after they start 7-0. The resume is not the greatest. Purdue is a bold team, in my opinion. So I don't know if they're even top 10, but they're going to be up there, top 15 at least. I think they will end up being top 10 at a point. Then, when they lose to Miami, I could see that one being a close one. They lose that. All of a sudden, you're like, hey, look, the first game, Boston College had a test. They played what I believe to be 2, 3, maybe bowl teams, 2 or 3 bowl teams. And they lay an egg against Miami. Let's go ahead and drop them out of the top 15. Then they lose at Virginia Tech. Okay, this is barely a top 25 team at this point. So Clemson's going to end up sleeping on a Boston College team who is still talented, have one of the better running backs in the country. They're going to sleep on them in Chestnut Hill. And I think they lose in Alumni Stadium out there in Chestnut Hill against Boston College because they sleep on them. And I think that's going to end up – now, I could be wrong because they would have just lost to Florida State a couple weeks prior in this scenario. And if they lose to Florida State a couple weeks prior, then that means that Clemson has no room for error. But I just am not buying the leadership of Kelly Bryant. And if Trevor Lawrence comes in, Trevor Lawrence is a talented guy, but I don't know if his attitude is up to par to be the starting quarterback at Clemson. And that's why I think there's a huge battle. If Trevor Lawrence is as talented as they say he is, then why isn't he the starter? Because he might not be able to lead the team. That's why he's not the starter right now. So they're 8-2 when they go into Tallahassee. They lose that one and beat Syracuse. Clemson and Florida State is going to be a matchup of 2 heavy powerhouses that they're not going to sleep on each other. They're both going to be heavy. Show me 12-0 Notre Dame. Dude, you're going to be disappointed in my Notre Dame picks. I'll get to them in a minute. But anyway, keep talking about the ACC. The reason I think the ACC gets left out in the playoffs is because I think Florida State gets a revenge against Miami and gets over that Miami. They would lose 2 games in a row, one at home, one on the road against Miami in this scenario, and I would go ahead and give the nod to Florida State. You know why? Because they're not going to want to lose to them 3 times in a row and give Miami a shot in the playoff. I think Miami – everyone's not high on, but their schedule is not that bad. It's pretty favorable. They get Florida State at home. They get Boston College on the road right before Boston College plays Virginia Tech, Clemson, Florida State, and they get Duke at home, which is going to be a team that could be primed for an upset. I think this defense is too good to really let Georgia Tech do too much in the triple option game. The only game I have them losing is at Virginia Tech because I think Virginia Tech is a quality team that can definitely do it. You got Florida State and BC both losing to oh yeah, I do. Shoot. Thanks for pointing that out, dude. Well, I think Florida State wins that. That could actually change a ton. If I have anyone else, because I swear I had 2 losses to 2 loss Florida State, and I think they will beat Clemson at home. I think they win against Notre Dame. I think I actually had them losing. I don't remember. I'll go ahead and mark them at 11-1. That changes a lot, actually. So, man, my predictions got exposed. So, moving on. ACC has some fixing to make. Here's Notre Dame, by the way. For some reason, my buddy Clay, he had Navy beating Notre Dame. I don't see that happening. Stanford and Michigan are good teams, solid teams to me. I just do not see the possibility of Notre Dame winning those 2 games. Going to Virginia Tech and to Northwestern and to USC is the difference in those games, and I think Florida State's too good. I see a 6-6 team with your squad, man. I pay my dues to Notre Dame. I have respect for Notre Dame. Strong, I respect. So a lot of people could be questioning the Iowa pick. Here's the thing. The 2 toughest teams they have to face in the Big Ten West, they get at home. Wisconsin, and they also got Northwestern at home. I think Northwestern is going to be good, so don't flip out about that Northwestern beating Notre Dame pick. But I think Northwestern is going to be a good, solid team this year. I think 10-2 is an easy mark with the schedule. I think they can beat Michigan State on the road. They can beat Michigan at home back-to-back. I think the fact that they're not going to be this bruising team that we are used to Northwestern kind of being. They're going to be a little bit of a more pass-heavy team that can wear out defenses. And that's why I think, Michigan's strength is the front 7 and Michigan State's strength is the front 7. Not that they have bad secondaries, but I think the Clayton Thorson being able to get the ball off quick, having receivers coming back with more experience, it's going to be a good year for the Northwestern Wildcats in that facet. Then they get Nebraska and Rutgers, so they're not going to overlook Michigan State or Michigan. You get Nebraska and Rutgers back-to-back. Wisconsin at home, and I think is their first loss because I think Wisconsin, even though their front 7 is lacking, that secondary is still quite solid for Wisconsin, in my opinion. And Iowa has one of the more underrated defenses coming back in college football. They still got Parker Hesse, which is a tremendous defensive player, in my opinion, for Iowa. One of easily the top 100 players in all of college football. I really like Parker Hesse. I really like Nathan Stanley. I think he's easily a top 3. He's at least easily a top 5 quarterback in the Big Ten. I see us splitting, and this is Notre Dame fan, by the way. I see us splitting Stanford and Virginia Tech. Michigan is a toss-up, but I can't see us losing to Northwestern in a game that will be 70% Notre Dame fans. I see us being close to 500, and I see USC being close to 500, and Notre Dame having more to play for. Here's the thing. Your schedule is too tough for me, really. I said this when I explained my predictions, even though I was wrong with the Florida State pick, but here's the thing. I see Notre Dame as a better team than their schedule would give me. I think the problem, and you'll see how high I am on Stanford, I think the problem is Stanford has a great backfield. KJ Costello, I think, ran away with the job last year and definitely played great down the stretch. And they also returned Bryce Love. Bryce Love, everyone keeps forgetting about. He was in Heisman talks last year. Bryce Love is a tremendous running back. Virginia Tech on the road is a hostile environment in Lane Stadium that's going to be, at that point, kind of desperate for a win because they would come off a loss against Duke. So one of 2 things will happen, and I think, that game will be close. One of two things will happen in the Virginia Tech game. Either Virginia Tech is going to play angry and also have more to lose because they want to stay in the fight for the division, or Virginia Tech will say, our season's over. We just lost to Duke on the road. Our season's over. We're not getting through this. And then they're going to slack and sleepwalk through the Notre Dame game. That's definitely not the only way I see Notre Dame winning. I think this will be a close game. I think Virginia Tech will be motivated. I think Justin Fuente is doing a great job of keeping the players focused game in and game out. But then you look at Georgia Tech last year, and it kind of gives you a little bit of concern. Northwestern, I really like their passing attack. I'm not huge on the Notre Dame defense right now. I'm not huge on Brandon Wimbush to be able to outplay Clayton Thorson, and I think that's what's needing to happen to beat Northwestern at their place. Not to mention, at this point, Northwestern will still be a one-loss team fighting for the West, because Wisconsin would have 2 conference losses at that point, so they would be a one-loss team fighting for the West. And I know this isn't a conference game, so it does not affect Northwestern whatsoever, but I think they will, the Northwestern faithful and the Northwestern fans, I think they will show up to at least make that more of a neutral site game, if not make it a home field advantage type crowd against Notre Dame. They're not the most passionate about football up there, especially on campus. Northwestern, when you talk football, that is a professional football city. That is a Chicago Bears city for sure. And out in Evanston, though, Clayton Thorson can sling that rock. If he has a receiver step up, not being what Austin Carr was, but similar to what he was Thorson's sophomore year, I think Northwestern could really do something this year. Florida State, I think, really talented. I think if DeAndre Francois, and people are calling me hypocritical because I'm saying this because I said one player does not make a team going from 6-6 to a college football playoff team. I have said that Florida State's going to do well this year, but if the struggles continue with Francois, they're not going to do as good. They're going to lose a couple more of these toss-up games. That, the reason it's not hypocritical is because they got more toss-up games. Their schedule's tougher this year. They lost a game against NC State where the D-line got after Blackman. But honestly, if you got a guy that can get the ball off quickly and recognize it, and more experienced starter in DeAndre Francois, I don't know if they lose that game, because that game was rather close. They lose a game against Miami that they really should have won. There were a couple games I can point at, and I said that Florida State, at best, with Francois, goes 9-3. They don't beat Alabama, how that game was going. They definitely don't beat Clemson. There's another game, but I can't remember the schedule right now. So let's move on. Kind of just going to this final top 25. And I'm going to keep Florida State at 11-2. I actually changed my mind on that Boston College pick just because Boston College, what I saw them do against a Florida State defense that actually carried the cake last year, I actually see Boston College winning that, and that might change Boston College's ranking. Yeah, it will. I'll just switch them with Michigan's. I'll switch them with Northwestern. I don't know. It's hard. Right now, I'll just switch them with Michigan State. Go ahead and give them 10-2, but this doesn't mean I just haven't looked at Boston College's resume afterwards too much. So here's my top 25 to end the season. I want to see what you guys think. So, of course, in the playoff, I got Auburn, Ohio State, Stanford, Texas. A week ago, I said, or not a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I have said Georgia, Ohio State, Utah and West Virginia, in no specific order there. That has changed because I have looked a little more at Utah. They did lose a little more than I was really thinking on defense. Their defense is still going to be good, and I think Utah's still going to be good. In fact, I can pull it up right here. I think they go 9-3. I think 10-2. I think they're a solid team. I just think they suffer from a tough road schedule. If they are able, which I think they are, able to beat Washington in Rice-Eccles Stadium, they still have to go to Stanford. They still have to go to Arizona State, to UCLA. 3 really tough road games right there. Washington State, I think, is going to fluffer a bit. They're going to struggle this season. I think they will have kind of an up-and-down year. I think they will be competitive in games like Arizona at home, Cal at home, and Utah at home, and USC on the road, but I don't see them winning those games. But that's what I see with Utah. And, I mean, you'll see. I'll tell you why I'm so high on Arizona, and you guys are probably looking at Arizona. Why are they? Because look at their schedule. Their road schedule matches up great. They go to Houston, which is probably their second toughest road game behind Utah. They go to Oregon State, to UCLA, and to Washington State. The only game I see out of the only games in conference that I see marked that I'm questioning is UCLA. But other than that, I mean, Arizona State, they get at home. I think that rivalry, the home team seems to carry the cake. Could be completely wrong on that, but it just seems to me lately that carries the cake. So I really like this Arizona schedule. I think the fact that they do have a weaker non-conference, I don't think Houston's going to be as good as they have been, even though they do have a dominant guy in Ed Oliver. And I think the game plan is going to be simply this, and this was a similar game plan to what they had with Lamar Jackson in Louisville. But here's the thing. Tom Herman, major why Tom Herman's a much better coach. But here's the thing I see is Oliver if Khalil Tate, then that game is going to be a toss-up. If Khalil Tate goes off running, that game is over by halftime. Now, I think Houston's going to be a solid team, guys. 9-3, 10-2. I think they will be. I think they should be the favorite to come out of the West in the American, for sure. So, moving on, the playoff teams, I had Auburn, Ohio State, Stanford, Texas, Florida State, and then why is Ohio in there? Well, I don't think Ohio will be that highly rated, but I'm going to give them this ranking due to the fact I'm going to have respect for them going 13-0 against a couple pretty decent teams in the MAC, but I think these guys are the only threat is Buffalo with Tyree Jackson coming back and a team that was pretty solid last year, wasn't too shabby, and Akron, the division champs in the East out of the MAC last year. I don't think Toledo's nearly as good. I think they take 1 year off. I think they will be back up to prominence into the MAC, but when it's not Toledo, there always is a team that pops out. I think Ohio is that team. Their schedule matches up good out of conference. They got Cincinnati and Virginia as their 2 tough games. I think those are very much winnable games. I do think that Cincinnati game will be really close. Virginia will be close for a few quarters. But that Ohio team, I think, will finish 13-0. I actually don't know if that game will be close. But anyway, Clemson at 10-2. A lot of people are going to hate this. I've already talked about their schedule. Alabama at 10-2. Here comes the calls for hate on Alabama. Look at who I have them losing to. Look at how much respect I give to Auburn. I marked Auburn as the number 1 team in the country. I think their schedule matched up just fine for them to only lose that game against Georgia. Iron Bowl, they haven't won in Tuscaloosa in quite a long time. I think 2010 was the last time they won in Tuscaloosa. I think that Jarrett Stidham is going to stand up. He will be a Heisman finalist. I think he is going to stand up, make a lot of plays. I'm really high on Cam Martin. This receiving core did suffer a couple injuries, is what I'm hearing, that could possibly affect him, and that could end up changing my mind if I can confirm that these guys are out for an extended period of time or in the entire season. But I don't really see any games that they will lose other in between Georgia and Washington, because they could easily lose Washington as well. And Washington, I could be a hit and miss on, but I changed my mind a lot. Let's just say that. As 3 days ago, I had Washington winning that game. But who's going to beat them in between Georgia and Washington? Alabama State, LSU, Arkansas, Southern Miss, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M, to me, are easy wins for Auburn. The only game I could see them possibly losing is at Mississippi State, which I think we're overhyping Mississippi State. I don't know if Moorhead's going to have the same effect on the Mississippi State team as Dan Mullen had. Not to mention, this was an 8-4 team last year, and the question about Nick Fitzgerald, if he can stay healthy, he had a big effect on that team last year. And so we'll see what happens exactly there. LSU I'm also pretty high on to finish strong. 2 of their 3 losses in the first 3 weeks of the season. I'm not too high on Miami, but I'm not too high on LSU to start the season. I think it will take a little bit of time for it to kick in to gear. And I do think they lose to Georgia just because I think Georgia is simply going to be a more talented, better team. And we're going to see a very competitive game, and that's where we're going to see Joe Burrow kind of start stepping up as quarterback. And yes, I said it. Joe Burrow is, I think, going to be the quarterback. And watching him at Ohio State, he's got a lot of poise. He's got experience playing a little bit, and he was behind the all-time Big Ten touchdowns leader in J.T. Barrett for a couple of years. So that has to have an effect on Joe Burrow. And I think they beat Alabama because of that Georgia game. I think they don't get beat up against Georgia. I think they make Georgia give Georgia a run for their money. I think Georgia walks away with the win. Now, I have Georgia losing week 2 against South Carolina just because that secondary is going to be untested against the pass. And Jake Bentley is, in my opinion, the best quarterback coming back in the SEC. Maybe Jarrett Stidham has an argument, though. So I got Georgia number 9, Boise State number 10. And again, I like their schedule matching up. If they can get by Oklahoma State, I see them losing 1 game in conference. I think if they don't have that quality win, though, in Oklahoma State, they will actually be ranked lower than having a more of a bad loss against, let's say, a Fresno State or a team on the road in Mountain West. But I think Fresno State's going to be that loss at home. Fresno State's angry. But they will get Fresno State back in the conference championship. But I think Boise State would be better off losing to Fresno State and beating Oklahoma State, having a quality win, even though Oklahoma State's not going to be the most quality opponent, than having the Oklahoma State loss, but not the bad loss and going undefeated in the conference. I could be wrong on that. I don't know how the playoff committee would do that. I just know I'll give Boise State props. I think the playoff committee would give Boise State props for going 12-1 because of the history behind Boise State. I really like Boise State's schedule to line up. I really like West Virginia's schedule lining up. Iowa's schedule, like I said, I really like that lining up as well. And that's basically why I got these teams always vaulted, is essentially outside of the top 4 teams. I think the top 4 teams are talented enough to make it to the playoff. Texas is there. I'll get to them in a minute. But outside of that, I think everyone else falls either victim to a tough schedule or is a successor of a favorable schedule. I think Iowa, West Virginia, Boise State are, in a favorable schedule. I think Georgia, Alabama, Clemson are not having a favorable schedule. Georgia has to go to South Carolina, and you know what? Georgia has a favorable schedule. I'm going to mark them off. I said they're going 11-1 in the regular season. I just think they lose to Auburn because Auburn's a better team than Georgia. I think it's going to be a similar thing to what we saw last year with Auburn and Georgia. I don't think there will be this many 2-loss teams. But I looked through every schedule, and that's why I said I'll revisit it. I looked through every schedule, said what I thought. But, it's not impossible for this to happen. As you guys can see, there's a lot of parity in college football. We'll see what goes on. Wisconsin is the victim of a tough schedule. Utah is the victim of a tough schedule because I think they're a good team. If they can get one more game at home like Arizona State, then all of a sudden you could possibly be looking at a one-loss team. LSU just struggles with two tough games right off the bat. I think that's why they fall. Washington falls victim to a tough schedule. Auburn in a neutral site. But neutral site, it's in Georgia, and Washington has to go all the way to the East Coast. So, that's basically what I think. Penn State, I just think, also is suffering from a little bit of a rebuilding year, mainly. I think Penn State is going to be weaker on defense. I think they won't be as strong on offense with less weapons. I think Trace McSorley will turn the ball over a little bit more with less receivers to throw the ball to, sling the rock to. So the final thing I'm going to talk about is the college football playoff controversy. And, in this scenario, I have it working out perfectly. It won't work out perfectly like this every year, as we saw with Penn State, Ohio State, and Ohio State, Alabama in the last couple years. If we require you to be a conference champion to be in the college football playoff, then you are looking at a college football playoff with three things. A lack of controversy. You know what you have to do to even be considered a playoff contender. If you can't win your division, you can't win your conference championship, you shouldn't have a shot. Those are essentially elimination games. If you got a Iron Bowl type game for Alabama, that's an elimination game, and they know it. I don't know if Alabama wins or loses that game, but it may not have been a game where Auburn basically punched Alabama in the mouth nonstop for 4 quarters. And that would also make the case for Ohio State playing against Penn State, not blowing that lead. Urban Meyer thinking about every play more. What can this do to this division? Now, I think it would have still probably happened because Penn State wasn't really in the scope of things when it came to how good this team is. Could they possibly win the East? They weren't really in the conversation. It was really just Ohio State, Michigan for a while after Michigan State fell off. So Ohio State, it was Michigan, and Penn State just jumped up there after they beat Ohio State. And they're like, well, what is Penn State doing out there? So here's what you essentially do. You make it a requirement because it will take out the controversy, as I just said. Number 2, it will make the regular season more interesting. If you have an Ohio State-Oklahoma type game, Ohio State beat the Big 12 champion in Oklahoma. If Oklahoma wins that game a couple years ago, if Oklahoma wins that game, let's say hypothetically Ohio State goes on to win the conference. Let's say Penn State just loses to Michigan State or another team in Minnesota. That was an overtime game. And let's say they lose that overtime game to Minnesota. Ohio State goes to the conference championship and they win. Oklahoma beat Ohio State, and they were the only team to beat Ohio State, but Ohio State's big. Then you can go head-to-head, and you can say, hey, look, this team, Oklahoma and Ohio State matters a little bit more. Oklahoma and Ohio State mattered a ton, but I think it matters a little bit more when you can say head-to-head is the reason why. So that's just an example, and you get into the scope of things. The conference championship also means more. The regular season means more. Ohio State, Michigan means just more. And this is why Ohio State's winning that game against Michigan knocks Michigan completely out of the playoff talk and gives Penn State the playoff, essentially, with a win against Michigan. So it makes it more interesting because games will matter more in terms of to not just the teams playing on that field, but to other teams around the country, giving them a shot. Michigan State and Penn State right after Michigan and Ohio State, those back-to-back games deciding the East. That game matters even more than it did. That game did not end up mattering at all. The Big Ten championship mattered for the Rose Bowl and the New Year's Six purposes, but it did not matter in the total scheme of the college football playoff. That needs to matter. All the conference championships, I think, need to matter. You take this past year, conference championships. Ohio State, Wisconsin didn't matter. USC, Stanford didn't matter. Now all of a sudden, USC is possibly playing for a spot if they can impress the committee like Ohio State did with the 59-0 a few years ago. They can impress the committee like that. Then USC could possibly jump in as the next top-ranked conference champion, or Ohio State, if they get a huge win like they did against Wisconsin and end up 5th in the country, they get in over Alabama because Alabama didn't win their conference. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is you won't have teams lay eggs as much. Alabama didn't lay an egg. Ohio State, though, laid an egg. And you know why? They were raw. They weren't as tested as we thought they were. They never gone up against a team like that. They never had a real kind of, grind mentality through that. They haven't played 13 games. They played 12. They had an extra week, and they still laid an egg. And I think if teams are not going to their conference championship, there's obviously something missing with that team, and that's what happened with Ohio State. There was something missing with that Ohio State team, and that's why they got the doors blown off of them against Clemson. So 3 points, less controversy, more interesting regular season, which is already the most interesting and the most impactful regular season in all of sports. And finally, more compelling college football playoff games. The only game to me that was between a conference champion and another conference champion that really wasn't that compelling was Michigan State and Alabama. We all knew Alabama was going to win that game because we didn't feel like Michigan State was the best team in the Big Ten. But guess what? They deserved it because they won the conference. So that'll do it for today. Last thing, shout out to Clay Ramsey for providing me with this Google Sheet. I'll see you guys later. Thank you guys for tuning in. And tomorrow I'll be back at least to give you guys my schedule for the upcoming week. See you later.